This is all unbelievably fascinating. To tie Zarqawi and Bin Laden, and then I want to kind of rewind a little bit to your process into the unit. You know, obviously SEAL Team 6 got Bin Laden in Pakistan and Abbottabad, and they put together what they viewed was like the 23 best operators from what Red Squadron. They called it an all-star team, and that publicly and in books has been very clear. Like that all-star idea of we're just going to pick the 23 all-stars fractured that squadron because the guys who didn't get picked were like, what? We're not good enough. In the unit, I interviewed a guy from the unit and he talked about how like the idea of an all-star team would never happen. Like when you get to a squadron, it's like you're all capable. Do you agree? Like, does Delta have the all-star team, or if you're on a squadron and your number gets called, you're just gone?
Yeah. Um, I think you told me when we get to the end of this discussion, we're going to talk a little bit about
We
SEAL
will.
Team 6 and
We will.
Delta. And I think that speaks volumes, right? You have an important mission and you have to pick the best of the best out of your organization because you're not confident in who you have, as your everyday bench. It would never happen in the unit. And again, I say it somewhat tongue in cheek. Like, to me, that is a serious indictment on an organization that you feel like your organic troop or your organic squadron doesn't have what it takes to get a premier mission. So we would never even think of that. Now what I will say um, is there is a lot of personality. One of my jobs as an officer was to sell our capabilities, our troop, our squadron. So it's funny because when people think about the military and they're like, oh, the president told them to do that. Man, the president's not telling us to do anything. We're telling the president what we think needs to be done. It's a very, very different relationship. If you're talking about Obama or Biden or Bush or Trump or whomever, like you're briefing them and their people like, hey, this is the number one bad guy. These are the conditions, and you basically establish this contract. So you write a con op and it basically has the conditions where it's like, if we can identify this guy and isolate him with these parameters, are you going to give us the approval to launch? So that's constantly in motion, you know and and I knew the Bin Laden stuff was brewing because that contract was signed, so to speak. Like, there with the contract with the Obama administration was kind of signed that said, if you guys are able to isolate him under these conditions, X, Y, and Z, and that's what we were constantly doing. I had some missions that were very, very sensitive, very contentious. And as the assault commander, it was my job to say, okay, if we can match these conditions, do you give us the go ahead? So it's not like the president ever wakes up and is like, I want you to go get Bin Laden. It's building, it's building, it's building, just like the Zarqawi thing, where it's like, hey, here are the 8 things we need. We call them triggers. These are the 8 triggers that we need met, and when we meet those triggers, you're going to say launch, and that's how it works. So it's a very, very different relationship. Where was I going with that? So I think that's one of those things that I think people don't recognize and realize is the president, even the National Security Council, they are taking your input. They're taking your advice. You're telling them what we can and can't do, and what that cost would come at.